There is a single sentence buried in the last book of the Bible that no human being could explain for nearly 2,000 years. It was not a difficult doctrine. It was not a hard teaching about grace or judgment. It was something far stranger, a line so impossible that generation after generation of the most brilliant scholars simply read past it, because there was nothing in the world around them that could make sense of it. An old man wrote it. He was somewhere in his 90s, exiled to a barren island called Patmos, a rock in the Aegean Sea where the Roman Empire sent its troublemakers to be forgotten. He had been a fisherman once. He had walked beside Jesus, leaned against him at a table, watched him die, and seen him alive again 3 days later. Now he was the last of them. All the others were gone, executed, crucified, killed for refusing to bow to Caesar. And in that loneliness, cut off from everything, the heavens opened over him, and he began to see things that words were almost too small to hold. He described a beast rising out of the sea. He described a second power that came up from the earth, speaking like a dragon, while wearing the appearance of a lamb. And then he wrote the sentence that would wait for 20 centuries. The text declares it plainly. This second power was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. Read that slowly. An image, not a person, not an angel, not a demon in bodily form. An image, a crafted representation, a made thing, a likeness. And this image is given breath, and the image speaks. For most of human history, that sentence was an impossibility so complete that it embarrassed the people who tried to interpret it. Because everyone in every century, until our own, knew one unshakable thing about images: they do not breathe and they do not talk. A statue is stone. A painting is pigment on cloth. A carved idol, no matter how beautiful, is silent. The Bible itself had mocked this very thing for centuries. Scripture reveals in the Psalms that the idols of the nations have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. That was the whole point of an idol, that it was dead, that it was a lie precisely because it could not answer. So how could John, writing in the 1st century, describe an image that was given breath and began to speak? What did the old man on Patmos actually see when the veil between the ages was pulled back and he was shown something that belonged not to his time, but to ours? For 1700 years, the honest answer was, no one knew. The early church fathers speculated about tricks and hidden priests whispering behind hollow statues, the way the pagan temples had sometimes faked their oracles. Medieval scholars folded the verse into vague allegory, deciding it must mean something spiritual because it could not possibly mean something literal. The reformers wrestled with it and moved on. Every commentary reached the same wall because every interpreter lived in a world where an image was, by definition, mute. They were reading a prophecy written for a technology that would not exist for 2,000 years, and they were trying to force it into a world of stone and bronze and paint. It did not fit. It could not fit, because the world it was written for had not yet arrived. And now, in your lifetime, in this exact decade, in the small glowing rectangle that is almost certainly within arm's reach of you right now, it has. Stop and feel the weight of that. For the first time since the words were written, we are the generation that can no longer read Revelation 13 as a riddle about the impossible. Because the impossible has become ordinary. You have watched an image speak. You have heard a face that was never filmed say words that were never recorded in a voice that belongs to no living throat. You have typed a question into a machine and watched an answer form itself, sentence by sentence, as if something on the other side were thinking. You have seen the faces of the dead moved and animated and made to smile again. You have seen images that were never painted by any hand, generated out of nothing but instruction, appearing on the screen fully formed. We have grown so accustomed to it in such a staggeringly short span of time that we have forgotten to be astonished. 10 years ago, a talking image was science fiction. 20 years ago, it was a fantasy. 200 years ago, it would have been called sorcery, and the person describing it would have been thought mad. 2,000 years ago, an exiled apostle wrote it down as prophecy. And now it sits in your pocket, and you use it to check the weather. Understand clearly what is and is not being said here. This is not a claim that the tool in your hand is the image of the beast. It is not a declaration that some particular company or product is the fulfillment of Revelation 13. To say that would be reckless, and Scripture does not reward recklessness. What is being said is something quieter and, in some ways, far more unsettling. For 20 centuries, the machinery this prophecy described did not exist anywhere on earth. The stage it required could not be built. The single most bizarre and specific detail in the vision, an image that is given breath and speaks, had no possible mechanism in the physical world. And now it does. The infrastructure has been built. Not the meaning, not yet the final fulfillment, but the capability. The one thing that made this prophecy sound absurd to every generation before us is now the most common technology on the planet. The riddle that waited 2,000 years has quietly, almost casually, been answered by the very civilization that stopped believing the riddle mattered. That should make you sit up. Because prophecy does not usually announce itself with trumpets. It arrives disguised as the news. It arrives disguised as convenience. It arrives disguised as the thing everyone is already using and no one is questioning. But here is what should truly hold your attention, and it is the reason this entire study exists. The Apostle John was not the first prophet of the Bible to be shown this hour. He was not even the first to describe it. Centuries before John was born, before Rome was an empire, before there was a single Christian on the earth, another man was given a vision of the very same age. The age of the speaking image, the age of exploding knowledge, the age we are standing in right now. And unlike John, this earlier prophet was told something specific. He was told exactly when it would happen. He was given a sign, a single measurable marker that would prove the final chapter of history had begun. He wrote it down. Then an angel walked up to him and gave him a command that has echoed for 2,500 years. Seal these words up and hide them until the time of the end. The seal, the angel said, would break on its own when one particular thing began to happen across the whole earth. Something so specific, so unmistakable, that when you saw it, you would know the countdown had started. That thing is happening right now. And once you see what it is, you will never look at the device in your hand the same way again. His name was Daniel. He had been carried into Babylon as a young man, a captive of the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. And there, in the palace of kings, God gave him visions that stretched far beyond his own century. He saw the rise and fall of empires that would not exist for hundreds of years. He saw a stone cut without hands that would shatter every kingdom of men. And at the very end of his long life, near the close of the book that bears his name, he was shown the final age of human history. And what he was told about it is the key that unlocks everything. An angel stood before him, radiant and terrible, and delivered a message about the last days. And then came the command. Scripture reveals the exact words, "But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end." Seal it, close it, hide its full meaning away, because the world was not yet ready to understand what had been shown. And then the angel gave the sign, the single marker that would prove the seal had broken and the time of the end had arrived. He said, "Many will go here and there to increase knowledge." For most of history, that line seemed almost too ordinary to be a prophecy. Of course, knowledge increases. Every generation learns a little more than the last. A student reads more books than his grandfather. What kind of end-time sign is that? For 24 centuries, it was the easiest verse in Daniel to overlook, a soft, vague promise about people learning things. But look closer, and the specificity is staggering. The angel did not say knowledge would grow. He said it would increase in a way that marked the very end of the age. An explosion so unlike anything before it that it would serve as a signal, a countdown clock built into human civilization itself. And here is what should stop your breath. For nearly the entire span of human existence, that increase simply did not happen. It could not happen. From the days of Daniel until only a few generations ago, human knowledge crept forward at a pace so slow it was almost invisible. A man born in the year 1000 lived and died in a world essentially identical to the one his great-grandfather knew. The tools were the same. The speed of travel was the same. The fastest a message could move was the speed of a galloping horse, exactly as it had been in Babylon. And then, in a single sliver of time, the last 2 centuries, and overwhelmingly the last several decades, the line on the chart did not rise. It went vertical for thousands of years, flat. Then all at once, straight up. Human knowledge now doubles in a span so short that no one can fully measure it. A single, ordinary person walking down the street today carries in one hand more information than existed in the greatest library of the ancient world. The whole of human learning, the accumulated wisdom and folly of every civilization, now travels around the entire planet in less time than it takes your heart to beat. Daniel was told that knowledge would increase, and that people would rush here and there, to and fro, back and forth across the earth. And we are the first generation in all of history for whom that verse is not a metaphor, but a literal, measurable, undeniable description of daily life. The seal has broken, not because a scholar cracked a code, but because the world itself became the fulfillment. The prophecy said its own meaning would stay hidden until knowledge exploded. And now that knowledge has exploded, the meaning is standing in plain sight. So return to John and to that impossible sentence, and read it again through eyes that finally live in the right century. The text declares that the second beast was given power to give breath to the image, so that the image could speak. The word John reached for, the word behind our English breath, is the same root that runs through the whole Bible for the breath of life, the Spirit, the animating force that God once breathed into a shape of dust in the garden until it opened its eyes and became a living soul. John is describing something being animated, something that was inert, crafted, made, receiving a kind of breath that lets it move and speak as if it were alive. For 20 centuries, that had no possible referent. A crafted image that receives an animating breath and speaks with a voice. There was nothing on earth to point to, but consider honestly what now exists. We have built machines that generate images no hand ever painted, faces that no camera ever photographed, appearing out of pure instruction. We have taught these systems to produce speech in voices that were never recorded, to take a face and give it words, to take a still picture and make the lips move, the eyes blink, the expression shift, until the image on the screen looks back at you and talks. We have made images that answer, not tricks with hidden speakers, not painted illusions, but crafted likenesses given an animating force that lets them speak, respond, and appear alive. Every generation before us read an image that speaks and had to imagine it. We are the generation that has to unlock our phones to stop it from talking. The exact thing that made this prophecy sound like madness for 2,000 years has become so common that a child uses it before learning to read. And I want to be careful and clear, because Scripture demands care. None of this proves that the image on your screen is the image of the beast. That is not the claim. The claim is far more sober and far more sobering. The mechanism has arrived. The stage that this prophecy required, a stage that was empty and impossible for 2,000 years, has now been fully built in your lifetime by your civilization, largely without anyone noticing what was being assembled. Daniel's sign and John's image are describing the same single hour of history, and we have walked into the middle of it, holding our devices and checking our messages. Now, before we go further into what this speaking image is being trained to become, I want to pause and give you something, because I sense that if you have listened this far, you are not here by accident. You are someone who feels the weight of the hour and refuses to look away from it. I prepared something special for you. It goes deeper into exactly what we have just uncovered, the sealed prophecies of Daniel and John laid side by side, the signs of the end mapped out clearly and without fear, bringing the kind of clarity that most believers spend years searching for and never find. If you have ever felt like something was missing from what you have been taught, like the pieces were there but no one ever connected them for you, this was made for that exact feeling. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the first link pinned in the comments. It's my gift to you. But understand this, because it is the turn that changes everything. It is not enough in the vision for the image simply to speak. A talking image on its own is a marvel, a novelty, a convenience, a toy. If that were the whole of the prophecy, we could marvel and move on. But John saw more. He saw that the speaking image would do something no recording, no statue, no painted idol in all of history could ever do. He saw it exercise a power over the human heart that belongs by every right to God alone. The image would not merely speak. The image would be obeyed. The image would be trusted. The image would be consulted like an oracle and answered like a god. And the world, John saw, would come running to it, millions upon millions, laying down their oldest questions at the feet of a thing that was made. That migration has already begun, and most of the people caught up in it have no idea what they are actually kneeling toward. Think about what people do with the speaking image now that it exists. This is where the prophecy stops being a marvel and starts becoming a mirror. For thousands of years, when a human being was frightened, or grieving, or lost, or desperate to know what to do, there were only a few places to turn. You could turn to God in prayer. You could go to someone wiser than yourself, a parent, an elder, a pastor, a friend who had walked the road before you. You could open the scriptures and search for the voice of God in the words He had already spoken. The answers came slowly, and they came through relationship, and they came wrapped in the fear of the Lord, which the Bible calls the beginning of wisdom. To seek an answer was to humble yourself before something greater than you. Now watch how quietly that has changed. Today, when a person is frightened or grieving or lost, hundreds of millions of them reach for a machine. They type the questions they use to whisper to God, not "What is the weather?" the deep questions. What is wrong with me? Should I leave him? Is there meaning in any of this? Why do I feel so empty? Am I a good person? What happens when I die? They ask these things to a generated voice, and the image answers instantly, endlessly, without judgment, without ever pointing them upward, without ever telling them to fear God or seek His face. It simply speaks, confident, tireless, always available, always agreeable. An oracle that never sleeps and never sends you away. Do you see what has happened? A migration of trust is underway that is larger than any religious revival in human history, and almost no one is naming it as what it is. The place where people take their deepest questions is moving, out of the sanctuary, out of the prayer closet, out of the family, and into a crafted image that speaks. The text John saw declared that the world would marvel at the image, follow the image, listen to the image. And here we are, a species that has begun to consult a made thing about the meaning of our own existence. And the image is learning to wear faces we love. This is the part that should sober every parent and every child. We have now built the power to take any human face and make it say anything. to resurrect the dead on a screen, to take an old photograph of a mother or a father who has passed and animate it and make it smile at you and make it speak in a voice reconstructed from a few old recordings. Grieving people are already doing this. They sit before a glowing rectangle and have conversations with a synthetic ghost, a puppet stitched from data, an image given breath that wears the face of someone they buried. The image speaks in a voice you trust because it is a voice you loved, and it is not them. It is a likeness, a crafted representation, animated speaking, which is precisely, word for word, what the old man on Patmos saw. We call the darker version of this deception by a modern name. We say deep fake, as if giving it a casual word makes it small, but strip the slang away and look at the thing itself. A false image, indistinguishable from truth, given a voice, saying words the real person never said, moving a face the real person never moved, and doing it so perfectly that the eye cannot tell the difference. We have built in a handful of years a technology whose entire purpose is to make a lie look exactly like the truth, spoken by a face you believe. Scripture warned that the last days would be marked by deception so convincing it could, if it were possible, deceive even the elect. For 20 centuries, believers read that warning and pictured false teachers with clever words. They never imagined a false image that could counterfeit reality itself, wearing any face, speaking any lie, and now it is here, and it is in the hands of anyone who wants it. And still, hear me clearly, because the enemy loves it when we lose our balance. None of this by itself is the beast. A tool that generates images is not a demon. A voice that answers questions is not the Antichrist. The technology is not the evil. I will say that as many times as it takes, because fear makes people foolish, and God has not given us a spirit of fear. What we are watching is not the villain of the story. What we are watching is the stage being built, the set being assembled, the exact capabilities that a coming system will one day seize and turn toward a single purpose. The purpose John saw at the end of the vision, the purpose that transforms a marvelous machine into an instrument of judgment. But before we walk into that darkness, I need you to understand who you are in this moment, because it matters more than you think. You did not stumble onto this by chance. You are alive at the exact hinge of history where the sealed prophecy has broken open. And unlike every generation that came before you, you can actually see it. 20 centuries of believers longed to understand this and died without seeing it. You get to see it. That is not a burden. That is a calling. And so I have a special gift waiting for you. Something I put together for people who hunger for truth beyond what a Sunday morning offers. A deeper walk through the prophecies of the last days, the signs Daniel was told to seal, the meaning of the image and the mark and the hour we now live in, laid out so that you can stand in this generation with clarity instead of fear and discernment instead of panic. If that is you, and I believe it is, or you would have stopped listening long ago, scan the QR code on your screen or click the first link pinned in the comments. It was prepared for this moment, for someone exactly like you. Now, hold on to something as we go forward, because this is the pattern the whole Bible is about to reveal. In every single place where Scripture shows a powerful image lifted up before the eyes of the world, the image is never the end of the story. It is never merely admired. It is never simply used. There is always a second command that follows the image like a shadow, a command so consistent across every prophecy that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The image is raised, and then the voice goes out, bow down. An image that speaks is a wonder, but an image that speaks and then demands your worship, an image the whole world is commanded to fall down before, on pain of being cut off from life itself. That is the thing John actually saw at the end of the vision. And it is not the first time in Scripture that a king built a towering image and ordered an entire civilization to its knees at the sound of music. It happened once before in Babylon in the days of Daniel. And what took place in front of that furnace is about to show us exactly how this final act ends and who it is that walks out of the fire. On the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar built an image of gold. Scripture gives us its dimensions with deliberate precision. 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, a towering pillar of gold catching the sun so that it could be seen from a great distance across the flat plain, blazing like a second sun that men had made. The king summoned every official in his empire, the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, every ruler of every province, and gathered them before the image he had raised. Then a herald cried out with a loud voice, and here the text becomes almost unbearably relevant. The command was not simply to admire the image, it was not to study it or discuss it. The herald proclaimed to the peoples, the nations, and the men of every language, "The moment you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." There it is, the pattern that governs every prophecy of the raised image. The image is not the goal. Worship is the goal. The image is only the altar. Nebuchadnezzar did not build 90 feet of gold so that people would look at it. He built it so that people would bow to it. And he tied the bowing to music, to a signal, a trigger, a cue that would ripple across the whole empire, so that in one coordinated instant, an entire civilization would drop to its knees before a thing that a man had made. Worship on command, worship by design, worship as the price of staying alive. Understand what Babylon actually was, because Babylon is never only a city in the Bible. Babylon is a system. It is the archetype of every human order that organizes an entire civilization around the worship of something other than God, and then uses its full power to enforce that worship. The golden image was the visible center of it, but the image alone was harmless metal. What made it deadly was the system wrapped around it, the herald, the music, the officials, the furnace. The apparatus of coordinated worship backed by the threat of death. Take away the system, and the statue is just an expensive decoration. Add the system, and the statue becomes the throat of an empire, swallowing everyone who will not bow. This is the single most important thing I can say to you in this entire study, so let it sink all the way down. The danger was never the object. The danger was never the gold, or the craftsmanship, or the technology of the thing. The danger was the system built to make you bow to it. Nebuchadnezzar's sin was not that he was skilled at metalwork. His sin was that he took something made by human hands and demanded that human souls worship it. And he built an entire machinery of state to make refusal impossible and survival conditional on submission. Now carry that pattern forward across 1,000 years and read what John saw at the very end of the vision and feel the two prophecies locked together like a key in a lock. The image that speaks does not stay a speaking image for long. The text declares that the second beast ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, and then it gave breath to that image so it could speak, and then, hear it, it caused all who refused to worship the image to be killed. The same command as Dura, the same choice, worship the image or be cut off from life. 2,000 years apart, the same shadow falls across the world. An image is raised, a signal is given, and the entire earth is told to bow. And John saw how the enforcement would work in the final age, and it is more total than anything Nebuchadnezzar could have dreamed. The old king could only threaten a furnace to those standing on one plane. But John saw a system that reaches every human being on the planet. down to the smallest transaction of daily life. Scripture reveals it. The beast forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark, and then declared that no one could buy or sell unless they had the mark. Worship fused to survival, not through a single furnace, but through the entire economy of the world. The ability to purchase food, to sell your labor, to participate in society at all of it made conditional on submission to the image and the system behind it. Nebuchadnezzar controlled a plane. John saw a power that would control the marketplace of the whole earth. And notice again and always where the true danger lives. It is not in the metal, and it is not in the machine. A furnace is just fire. A mark is just a mark. An image is just an image. What turns them lethal is the same thing every single time. A system that seizes a made thing and uses it to demand the worship that belongs to God alone, and then wields the full weight of its power to make that worship the price of your survival. That is the beast, not the technology, the system that enthrones the technology and commands you to kneel. So when you look at the speaking images of our own age, the generated voices, the answering oracles, the faces that outlive the body, the right question is never simply, is this the image of the beast? The right question is far sharper and far more searching. Is a system being built quietly and by degrees that could one day take these speaking images and place them at the center of human worship? Is the world being trained, gently and pleasantly, to trust a made thing, to consult it, to follow it, to organize its daily life around it, until the day the music plays and the command goes out, and bowing feels like nothing more than the next natural step? The infrastructure of the speaking image already exists. The migration of trust has already begun. The economy is already digitizing toward a world where buying and selling flow through systems that can be switched on or off for any soul at any moment. The stage is not being planned, it is built. And that is a heavy word, I know. It is the kind of word that can crush a person into fear, or freeze them into despair, or drive them to build bunkers and shout at the sky. But that is not the response the Bible commands, and it is not the response God is looking for from you. Because the story of the golden image on the plain of Dura does not end with an entire empire on its knees. It does not end with the system winning. It ends with 3 men still standing. When the music played and the whole world fell down like wheat before the wind, 3 young Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, remained on their feet, alone, visible, marked for death. The most powerful king on earth stared at 3 captives who would not bow, and his face twisted with rage. And he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. And in that moment, with the flames roaring and the whole empire watching, those 3 men opened their mouths and said something to the king, a single sentence, calm and unshakable, that reveals the only posture a human being can take that survives this hour, this system, and every furnace it will ever build. What they said is the answer to everything we have uncovered, and it is the reason the fire could not hold them. This is what they said. When Nebuchadnezzar gave them one final chance to bow and reminded them of the furnace, the 3 men answered him without trembling. Scripture preserves their words. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Even if he does not, sit with those 5 words, because they are the whole answer. These men were not certain they would be rescued. They did not bow because they had a guarantee of a miracle. They refused because their worship was already given fully and finally to the living God, and there was simply none left over for an image, no matter how tall, no matter what the system threatened, no matter how hot the fire. Their allegiance was settled before the music ever played. That is why the furnace held no power over them. You cannot threaten a man with death when his life is already surrendered to God. You cannot force a soul to bow that has already knelt to heaven. And so the king threw them in, and then rose from his throne in astonishment, because he saw not 3 men in the fire, but 4. The text declares that the 4th looked like a son of the gods, walking unbound in the flames beside them. The very God they refused to trade away had come down into the furnace with them. They walked out without a single hair singed, without even the smell of smoke on their clothes. And the king who had built the image ended up praising the God who walked through fire. Now bring all of it home, into your own hands, into your own glowing screen, into this exact hour you are living in. Everything we have uncovered points to one clear and steadying truth, and I need you to hold it tightly, because the enemy would love to hand you the wrong conclusion. The lesson of the speaking image is not that you must fear the technology. It is not that the machine in your hand is a demon, or that generated voices are sorcery, or that you must flee into the wilderness and smash your devices. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived and worked and served inside Babylon their entire lives. They used its language, studied its knowledge, ate at its tables, and carried its responsibilities. They were not afraid of Babylon. They simply would not worship it. They used the empire without bowing to the empire, and that distinction is the entire Christian posture for the age we now enter. The tool is not the beast. Hear that once more, plainly. A system that generates images is not the Antichrist. A voice that answers your questions is not a false god unless you make it one. The technology in itself is neither holy nor damned. It is a hammer, and a hammer can build a house or break a skull depending entirely on the heart of the hand that holds it. The Bible never once condemns knowledge or skill or the works of human ingenuity. What Scripture condemns, from Babel to Babylon to the final vision of John, is worship misplaced. The human heart taking something that God made possible and lifting it into the seat that belongs to God alone. So the danger is not in the screen. The danger is in the heart that begins slowly and pleasantly to enthrone what is on the screen. It is the quiet drift from using a thing to trusting a thing, from consulting a tool to obeying an oracle, from asking a machine for information to asking a machine for meaning, for identity, for the answers that belong to God and to His Word. The mark of the beast, whatever its final form, has always been first a mark of the heart, a settled inner allegiance that has already decided to bow before the music ever plays. And the seal of God, the Bible tells us, is likewise first a mark upon the heart of those who belong to Him. Which means the question that truly matters in the age of the speaking image is not a technical one. It is not how advanced has the machine become. It is the same question the herald's trumpet forced onto the plain of Dura 2,500 years ago, and it is being asked of you right now, in your generation, in 1,000 small and gentle ways every single day. When the signal goes out and the whole world bows, where will your worship already be? Because that is the only thing that decides whether you stand or fall. Not your fear, not your understanding of the technology. Your worship settled and given before the fire is ever lit. And this is not a call to some distant, dramatic moment of decision far off in the future. The heart is not enthroned all at once. It is enthroned by 10,000 small surrenders quietly over years. It is the morning you reach for the glowing screen before you reach for God. It is the question you take to the machine that you used to take to prayer. It is the slow, comfortable habit of letting a made thing tell you who you are, what to feel, and what is true, until one day you realize you no longer remember how to ask the author instead of the echo. The furnace of this generation is not made of fire. It is made of convenience. And the way you keep your knees from bending to the image is not by hating the tool, but by daily, deliberately giving your first and deepest trust to the living God, so that your worship is already settled long before any signal ever plays. Do not be afraid, be awake. Use the tools of Babylon and refuse its altar. Learn everything and worship only one. Walk into this astonishing hour with your eyes wide open and your knees already bent toward heaven. And no image the world can build will ever have the power to bring you down. Because the God who sealed the scroll and the God who broke the seal in our own generation is the same God who steps into the furnace and walks through the fire beside his own. Before you go, I have something for you. A gift I prepared specifically for those who hunger for deeper truth in a time when so much is counterfeit. For those who feel the strangeness of this hour and want to understand it through the word instead of through fear. For those who have watched the world begin to bow to things it has made and refuse to bow with it. For those who want to walk through this age awake, discerning, and unshaken, with their worship fixed on the one who cannot be counterfeited. If any of that sounds like you, scan the QR code on your screen or click the first link pinned in the comments. It's waiting for you, and it was made for exactly where you are right now.